out today, the House heard testimony from President Biden's top defense officials on the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. 3 generals fielded questions regarding the steps they took to prepare for the withdrawal and why the execution went so poorly. And joining us now for more on this is John Ullyot, Republican strategist and former National Security Council Spokesman under President Trump. John, welcome back. Always great to see you.
Great to see you, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you. You know, a lot to get to, but first, I'm going to get your thoughts on the hearings and maybe what the big takeaway was for you.
So, Tracy, we had 2 days of hearings. That doesn't happen very often, but it showed there were 2 full days of hearings. And I used to work on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and there it was almost unheard of. You'd have a day-long hearing, but that shows how important this is, not only to the administration because they're taking a lot of heat for this, but it's also very important to the American people. If you look at the president's approval rating, really in the last, since this debacle that he's had in Afghanistan, his approval rating has really gone down 15 points nationally, and in some states like Iowa, it's gone down 20 points. So this is on a lot of people's minds, and that's why senators from both parties wanted to really grill the generals about that. So in terms of takeaways, what I would say is 2 things. Number one is the president was contradicted by his generals on the fact that they had recommended that there be an orderly exit and that we not pull down the number of troops from 2,500 to 0 before we had all of the Americans out of Afghanistan and our friends and partners who had visas who were also due to come out. So we weren't able to do that. And the president was asked on ABC by George Stephanopoulos whether or not he had that recommendation from his generals, and he flat out denied it. And they were under oath in both the Senate and the House today, and they said that's actually not true, that they argued directly. They said it as diplomatically as they could, but they said we actually gave him, they contradicted him and said we gave him the advice not to draw down the troops until we have all of our people out. That was number one. Number two, the other contradiction was that President Biden last week told the United Nations that the war in Afghanistan is over, and General Milley, both generals were asked about that, and they both said that this is actually not over, that we're going to be looking for over-the-horizon capability there. And so we can't do an end zone dance the way that the president wants to do in terms of us getting out of there, particularly not in the way that we got out of there, where 13 Americans were killed and we had 10 innocents that were killed who were attacked with a drone strike. So it's very troubling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things that struck me, too. All the generals basically said, we are at an increased risk for terrorism here now in the homeland because of what was going on in Afghanistan. Talk to us about that.
That's exactly right. So we've always had a threat from the only reason we were in Afghanistan, we ended up staying there for 20 years, which is something that President Trump campaigned against back in 2016, said he was going to get us out of there because no more endless wars is what he said. And the American people have really, it was almost an 80-20 issue in terms of wanting us to get out of there. But if you look at the sole reason we were supposedly going over there was to get bin Laden and to break up Al-Qaeda and what later became ISIS in Afghanistan, but to really end terrorism, terrorists using Afghanistan as a home base, if you will, and they absolutely did that before 9/11. And so we were going to go over and only be there as long as we needed. But then we got into this whole idea of nation building, and nation building doesn't serve us. It's not what the American people are looking for. I mean, there are a number of countries around the world that we can go to nation build if that's our job, but we don't want to spend taxpayer dollars. But we spent literally trillions of dollars over 20 years there. And so right now it's just a matter of the terrorist issue was solved. That's the only reason we were over there. But the generals said that that hasn't even been solved now, that there are more terrorists, more ISIS, Al-Qaeda's coming back. And so this is something that we really need to keep an eye on. But we lost our focus there. And if we had just been going after the terrorists, we probably could have dealt with that a lot better than we did over the last 20 years.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions. One thing that I also noticed, a couple of questions to General Milley about that conversation that he had with a Chinese general. Let's quickly talk about that.
Okay, very quickly, Tracy. I'm glad you brought that up because that was another big headline that came from the hearing. So General Milley, he did 2 things according to the Bob Woodward book. Number one, he talked to Bob Woodward. He talked to a couple of other Mike Bender, the Wall Street Journal, wrote a book, as well as Carol Leonnig of the Washington Post. He talked to all three of them for their book, and the president just tweeted last night, said, look, why is it that General Milley is talking to these reporters instead of doing his job and preparing to get us out in Afghanistan? And really, we probably would not have had such a botched exit if he had been not focused on burnishing his political credentials through these books. So that's another reason why Marsha Blackburn, Josh Hawley, two senators, have called on him to resign for that. But really quickly, in terms of the Chinese segment, is that China, General Milley admitted that he talked to China both before the election and then right around January to basically tell them, hey, I'm going to give you personal heads up if we're ever going to be attacking you. That's not his job to be talking and contradicting the president. The president was never going to go to war with China, but there's nobody authorized him to go ahead and take that action and decide to call up his counterpart, the general over in China, and then he had to deny that. So it's a real mess for General Milley, and that's why it's both the China issue as well as the other issue about talking to those writers as a member of the military instead of focusing on his job that have him in the hot seat right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but I got to tell you, it seems like we have more questions really than answers from these hearings. So I guess we'll have to see what shakes out.
We'll have to stay tuned, and once again, the president is going down in the polls, and so this is something that, to your point, we're going to be revisiting here over the next few weeks, certainly.
Absolutely, John. Thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate it.